Hi class, Mrs. Calvi here again. I just want to go over a couple other things having to do with integers. We talked about whole numbers in the first video, but I do want to go over integers when it comes to decimals and fractions as well. So just looking at a number line, I have a number line on my screen here. You know that 0 in the middle, positive numbers to the right of 0, negative numbers to the left of 0. So now let's just say we needed to identify where a decimal comes in between two whole number integers. So if I were to be looking at, let's just say I have the number, let's see, if I had 2.4, oops, let me just change the color to make it a little easier. Okay, so if I had the number 2.4, all right, now where on my number line would that 2.4 land? Well, 2.4 is greater than the whole number 2, but it's less than the whole number 3. So I know that 2.4, and it's a positive, is going to come somewhere in between positive 2 and positive 3. Now, if we were to look at this number line, let's say I were to put the halfway mark. So let's say I had right in the middle of 2 and 3, you should know that between the whole number 2 and the whole number 3 would be 2.5 right in the middle. So that would be 2.5. So if we wanted to know where 2.4 is, we know that that 2.4 is going to come right before the 2.5. All right. So now let's say I had the number, let's say I had negative 0.3. Now this is a little bit trickier. So 0.3, so I know that 0.3, or I need to know that that comes between 0 and negative 1. So negative 0.3 comes between 0 and negative 1. So it's going to be in between here somewhere. So again, let's identify where our halfway mark is. So if I went right in between 0 and negative 1, that would be my negative 0.5. So negative 0.5. Now the negative 0.3 is going to be closer to that 0. So that negative 0.3 is going to be somewhere in between here. All right. You don't necessarily need to identify exactly where now, but you need to know what numbers they would come in between on the number line. All right. So now let's say we were working with fractions. Okay, so let's say we had the fraction 1/2. And we needed to know what numbers or what integers 1/2 would come in between. So 1/2 is going to be greater than 0 but less than 1 whole. So greater than 0 but less than 1 whole, and it's a positive. It's positive 1/2, so we know we're going to the right of our 0 on our number line. And 1/2 is going to come in between 0 and positive 1 on the number line. Well, 1/2 is the same thing, if you were to put that in decimal form, is the same thing as 0.5. And that is going to land right in the middle. Whoop, I put it in the wrong spot. Sorry. Right in the middle of 0 and 1. And this is where the 1/2 would end up landing. Okay? So let's say we had the fraction, let's say it was negative 3/4. Negative 3/4. Well, this is where you need to know is, well, is negative 3/4, is that going to be in between 0 and negative 1, in between negative 1 and negative 2? Well, if we were to get rid of that negative sign and not think about the negative sign right now, 3/4, think of it as money, as quarters. Three out of 4 quarters is 75 cents, right? And that's less than $1 or less than 1 whole, you can think of it as. So I know that this negative 3/4 is going to come in between 0 and negative 1 because it's not negative 1. It's still technically greater than negative 1 because remember, these are negative numbers that we're talking about. So this negative 3/4 is going to come in between 0 and negative 1. All right, so that's where that would end up landing. So if we were to add that, that would go in between here, and that would be our -3/4. All right. Now down the road, we will get into more specifically the values of these to make it a little bit easier as to where they would land on the number line. Now, the only other thing I want to go over is I want to go over absolute value a little bit, just because they mention within the assignment today about absolute value. I know we're going to go into absolute value a little bit more in a couple of days in lesson 3, but I'm just going to give you a quick overview of it. Okay, so absolute value, basically, again, is telling us the distance a number is from 0. All right. Now, the one thing we have to remember is absolute value is never negative. Okay. It is never negative. Absolute value will always be positive. All right. So let's say I had the number -3, and we're talking absolute value. So these are the absolute value lines, and I would read this as the absolute value of -3. Now, if I want to know what the absolute value of -3 is, all I'm doing is I'm counting the distance it is from 0 and making it positive. So in this case, -3, the distance from 0 is 3 units, or 3 hops on the number line. So the absolute value of -3 is equal to 3. All right. Now, once you find the absolute value of this, the absolute value lines disappear. They do not go along with your answer. All right. So same thing. If I had, what is the absolute value of 5? Well, the absolute value of 5 is how many units away from 0 on the number line? It's 5 units away from 0. So that means the absolute value of 5 is equal to 5. All right. Remember, you're not going to put -5 because what did we say? Absolute value can never be negative. So that's a red flag. If they're asking you a question as to solving an absolute value and you have a negative for your answer, that's a red flag. You know it should not be negative. Now, let's say we were working with even a decimal. So let's say we had, what is the absolute value of -2.5? Well, -2.5. -2.5 is how many units away from 0 on the number line? It is 2.5 units away from 0. So the absolute value, of -2.5 is equal to 2.5. Okay? And I will talk to you guys soon.